Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news. And welcome back to another edition of Capital Connection. Fridays during the Noon Report, we give you direct connection to what's happening in Albany and Harrisburg with the experts on the issues. At the state capitals, they are Michael Geer with the Pennsylvania Family Institute and Jason McGuire with New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedoms. And Jason, talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place. That's where New York state lawmakers are. It is the height of budget season, crunch time in Albany, and they have to strike a deal with a governor that many of them want out of office. That can't be easy.
Yeah, there's a lot of tension right now between the governor and the legislature. The governor is just digging in, giving every indication he's not going anywhere, may even be considering re-election, and a legislature that just wants nothing to do with him. So it's been a very challenging environment with that $193 billion state budget you really do in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, and controversy following the governor of Pennsylvania as well. He can't run for re-election, but there looks like there is going to be an investigation into nursing home deaths in Pennsylvania as well, Michael. Talk about that a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, this is an investigation that was spawned by the House Majority Leader, Carrie Benninghoff. And basically, there were 12,700 Pennsylvanians that died in nursing homes. And Governor Wolf followed the same thing that the Governor Cuomo and some other Democrat governors did, which was to put COVID-positive patients out of hospitals back into nursing homes, which spread this virus to lots of elderly folks in those places, and many died. And so this is an investigation that needs to happen. I've often wondered why Governor Wolf doesn't get mentioned in the same sentence with Governor Whitmer and Governor Cuomo and others who did these orders.
Jason, let's turn the page. Looks like adult use marijuana is go for launch this year, said to be imminent. Why push pot in the middle of a pandemic?
We've heard that phrase imminent describing marijuana again and again, and I hope it is just more talk that we've heard from the last years, and it doesn't come to be. But it does seem like there is more intensity this year. Partly they're using it as a rationale because of the financial situation of the state. That's kind of a farce, though, because the revenue from this wouldn't even be seen for several years. But at the end of the day, the polling indicates that people are moving in favor of marijuana legalization in a very liberal state like New York.
Yeah, and Governor Wolf in this week, Michael, went public with that long-awaited marijuana listening tour report that the lieutenant governor went on. He suggested, and I had a hard time believing this, I'd love to get your thoughts. He suggested that 60 to 70% of Pennsylvanians support marijuana legalization. Do you think it's really that high?
No, I really don't. And part of that is that in addition to this listening tour, which was kind of bogus, it was the lieutenant governor going to places and getting an audience that was very supportive of it and then suggesting that that was somehow scientific. But then we also have these big lobbying firms that are being paid for by big marijuana, big tobacco that has big investments in marijuana legalization. They do these things called push polls that get numbers like this because the way they phrase the questions, the way that they approach the audience that they're polling pushes a result like this 70%, and I don't think it's legitimate. I don't think the numbers are anything close to that.
Now, there's an impeachment inquiry underway, Jason, in Albany, and this is moving along parallel tracks, one in the state legislature, the other from the Attorney General. Do you fear at all, and I've heard this question raised a lot in some circles, that the harassment scandals, as serious as they are, do you fear that they may overshadow what some consider the bigger scandal here, the nursing home situation?
Yeah, I think that's already happening. I mean, there's a whole lot more media being written about these sexual harassment allegations than there are about the nursing home deaths that have happened in our state. And as Michael referenced earlier, this is a story that's wider than just Governor Cuomo. And so if folks can focus on sexual harassment allegations for one governor, it really does hide the story from other governors around the country that did similar things on the nursing home scandals. And perhaps at some level, that's really what's occurring here, is a tragedy that is not being reported on enough.
Yeah, hopefully somebody will keep digging. And Michael, some have likened getting a COVID vaccine in your state to a glorified scavenger hunt. The Commonwealth is ranking below the national average in terms of its vaccine effectiveness. What are they doing wrong, and how can they improve the process?
Well, this is going to seem kind of blunt, but I think it's standard Pennsylvania incompetence. It's the same reason why our Pennsylvania Turnpike is the highest cost toll road in the whole world.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania just is not all that very good at anything. I was talking to a neighbor who just recently got his first vaccine shot. His wife got hers the same day, but at locations that were an hour apart. It's because they were doing that same scavenger hunt. It's what Pennsylvanians are finding. And the governor has said, we're going to try again and do it better. The acting secretary of health said, we have a new plan. But whether or not they have the competence to pull off a good plan is a question mark.
All right, we'll see. Hey, well, this was a big week for you, Jason. Your annual legislative day went online, as a lot of us are these days. The first digital day of action. We'll want to talk about some of the issues you brought up at that event. One of them is the Pregnancy Center Report Bill. What is it? Why do you oppose it?
Yeah, this is a bill that's being introduced by some of Planned Parenthood's political allies in the state legislature. And essentially, it would allow government to come into the pro-life center and require very onerous data collection requirements. Those requirements, that data, we believe would not only hinder the work of pro-life pregnancy centers, but then could be used as possible litigation against those pregnancy centers down the road. This is government's attempt to get their nose into that pro-life pregnancy center. Now, mind you, this is not about a Planned Parenthood facility or any other pregnancy center. It is pro-life pregnancy centers. We believe it is biased, it is targeted, and it should be rejected by the state legislature.
Yeah, the Equality Act, taking a break from Harrisburg, heading to D.C. for just a minute, Michael, but this is so important. There was a hearing on Wednesday before the Judiciary Committee about this. A lot of people said, no, it wouldn't really interfere with the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Others say that's nonsense. It would need 60 votes to pass the Senate. What would it look like if this were to ever become law?
Well, your listeners should know that virtually every major Christian organization in the country is raising red flags about the Equality Act. People of faith who live and work consistently with their religious belief would be targeted based on their views on marriage and human sexuality. They would be impacted. Women and girls would be forced to compete in athletics on an unfair playing field. Abortion would basically, and public funding of abortion would basically be mandated by the Equality Act. Women's shelters would be forced to admit biological men. It's such a long list, Bob, that I can't go through it all here, but people need to know the Equality Act is very dangerous, and they need to contact their senators about it.
Yeah, and it's almost there. It's on the 20-yard line if they're going down the field, in a matter of speaking, close to the end zone. Let's talk about another issue you raised this week at your Digital Day event, Jason, and that is DASA, the Dignity for All Students Act. On the surface, seems like something that's a pretty good idea, but when you dig in a little bit, this is also some dangerous legislation, and now they're trying to apply this to faith-based schools. Please explain.
Yeah, and the same topic of going places where government has no business being, this would essentially take an LGBT agenda item, build as an anti-bullying curriculum, and then push that into faith-based private schools. So if you are a parent that really wants your child to grow up to have a traditional understanding of human sexuality, to know that there is male and female, that could be problematic if you're in a private school. This is another one of those, I believe, blatantly unconstitutional issues, but the Constitution seems to matter little to the members of our state legislature these days.
Wow, and we got time for one more question. Michael, Easter Sunday will mark Pennsylvania's resurrection of sorts from COVID restrictions. Indoor capacity limits, restaurants, gyms, theaters going to go up to 75%. In your opinion, should this have happened much sooner?
Well, I think so, and I think it points to sort of the problem that has existed with Governor Wolf basically being the sole source for all COVID restrictions and all COVID guidelines with the emergency declaration, and that's what's going to be on the ballot in the May primary is the repeal of the governor's powers and to allow the legislature to have more of a say. I think there is wisdom in abundance of counselors, and I think this should have been differently done and why I support the constitutional amendment that's on the ballot in May.
All right, and just like that, our time is up. We went a lot of places those past 10 minutes, but there's so many more issues we couldn't dig into. If you have questions about the great work going on at the Pennsylvania Family Institute, Michael, where can folks check you out?
PAFamily.org.
Stay informed as well in New York. Jason, your site, sir?
AlbanyUpdate.com.